in some way recognized as a public sinner. To resist large-scale Muslim immigration, in my judgment, is to be responsible in the sense of making sure that those who are immigrating to the country remember that the definition of the church's teaching is that the individuals are not able to find a way of living in their own country. And this is not true of immigrants who come, who are opportunists, and in particular in the case of Islam, which by its definition is believes itself to be destined to rule the world, coming in large numbers to countries, and you don't have to be a rocket scientist to see what's happened, for instance, in Europe, in countries like France and Germany, and also here in Italy. And it's also happening in the United States. There's a very interesting book written called No-Go Zones, in which records places in the United States where, in fact, Muslim immigrants have set up their own legal order. In other words, they resist the authority, the legitimate authority of the state.
Wow. So when's the last time you heard someone really accurately describe in the way that he just did what's happening with Muslim immigration? Not me. I honestly, I've not heard that explained in that way. And I think it's kind of outstanding, first of all, that he's doing it. And second of all, that we have the opportunity to now, because he's doing that, we can just take a moment and say, okay, is he right? Is he telling the truth about this? So let's look at the remainder of his comments. It's number 3.
To be opposed to wholesale or large-scale Muslim immigration is in fact, as far as I'm concerned, a responsible exercise of one's patriotism, in the sense that yes, people who are true refugees who can't live in their own country, we must receive them and help them in every way. But this is not the case when you have simply a large-scale immigration.
So he's talking about large-scale immigration where assimilation does not occur. Now, he didn't say specifically assimilation doesn't occur, but we know that when there's a large-scale immigration of any kind, the individuals who come in usually end up getting situated together. And so the force of habit of human beings is we're going to be most comfortable in the environment that we're used to, even if that environment is detrimental to us. So what you see is these no-go zones popping up because they get here to America, and assimilation means you have a few people from a people group coming in, and they're coming in, in a family unit, of course. And by a few, I mean, it can be tens of thousands, but comparatively, the people are not being located in one space. They're being spread out across the country, and the communities that they go into have been prepped and are prepared to receive them. So then they're given the opportunity to learn about American life and to be assimilated, which means gradually, it's a shock to the system no matter how you do it. But it's a gradual adoption and adaptation to American life that it doesn't mean that the immigrant completely leaves behind everything that they knew before, but it means that they begin to accept and incorporate the new things that are that they're experiencing, that they're coming into contact with. And as that happens, the people who are immigrating in, they're much more likely to accept, okay, we're coming from an Islamic country where women have no power. Women are property. They're not even allowed to leave the compound without a male companion. Here in this country, women don't have any of those restrictions. In order for you to accept that, if you come in and you're in a locale where everyone from your home country that's immigrating in year after year, decade after decade, they're all getting located in this one central area like we're seeing up in Dearborn, Michigan, those people tend to just say, yeah, we're in America, but our ways are better, even though they had to leave their country, right? Their country's war-torn and things didn't work out. They had to leave there, and they're still going with the force of habit, going with what they know, reinstituting the same policies that tore down their previous home, namely Islam. and they put that into practice. And then before you know it, yeah, we're in America, but our people don't allow women that kind of freedom. Our people, or if we do allow them that kind of freedom, it's so that we can send them to Congress so they can bring Sharia back to reality, like Ilhan Omar. These are the kinds of ideas that she has. Un-American ideas that are unworkable for a population such as our own. And so you see this happening again and again and again, but the worst culprits, the ones who it seems to impact in the very worst way, tend to be those who are practicing Islam. So what he's saying, I know it's controversial and, there's probably been some pushback, but I was surprised to hear it because not only do I agree, but it's time for more people in positions of leadership, like Cardinal Burke speaks to huge, like millions of Catholics. And his saying this, his making this statement and summing up what's been happening around the world, especially in Western Europe, where if you think about it, the primary goal of someone who is quote unquote a refugee or seeking solace someplace else would be to go to a country that has the same beliefs and ideals that they have. So people who practice Islam want to come to America for their prosperity, for the job opportunity and all of that. But as far as the freedom and the egalitarian nature of our treatment of men and women, the equality, the Constitution, that's not what they're here for. And he spoke of the subjugation that is built into Islam, the political portion of Islam, where people who practice Islam believe that one day they will establish a caliphate and there will be no other religion left except Islam on the face of the earth. And they believe that they can help bring that up to being, whether it's by lying, which they call taqiyya, or through brute force, meaning they have more children than everybody else around them and they take over by sheer numbers, or through the making of war. In any of those scenarios, a receiving country has to be aware that that is the goal of this religious sect and that's what you're getting. When you say we're going to take in this many, thousands, tens of thousands of refugees from this part of the world, the part of the world that's practicing Islam, you're basically saying you want to bring this into your culture and incorporate it in. You're bringing them in and making them citizens. Once they're here and they're citizens, what all can you do about it? And the resulting terrorism, which people online love to try to equate homegrown terror from Americans with terrorism from people who are, they're some kind of immigrant from abroad. And my response to that is the same as it is with the other kinds of crime that we have here in this country that are done by Americans. We already have enough crime. We already have enough criminals. We already have enough potential homegrown terrorists without bringing more in so that we can increase the likelihood that we have that going on. So it's not about not wanting to help. We do help. We send billions of dollars in aid to Middle Eastern countries. Americans are already paying through the nose for the privilege of being helpful. The issue here is not that we don't want to be helpful. Are you kidding me? The numbers belie that fact. That's not a fact. Let me adjust that. The numbers that we send, the dollars, American taxpayer dollars that we send to the Middle East, and I'm not talking about the military defense budget. I'm talking about the dollars that we send in U.S. aid, dollars with no strings attached. The money just goes over there and they could blow it into the wind, whatever. It's there. Those dollars are the proof that we're not xenophobic, Islamophobic. We don't care. None of that. If we were truly Islamophobic, the first thing we would do is turn off the spigot and stop sending all that money over there. We'd pull every bit of military resource, every man, woman, every dependent child. We would pull everything we had out of the Middle East and we would say, we have enough oil reserves to last us for 300 years. We'll see you in 300 years. And we would pull out. If we were truly Islamophobic and we had a problem with Islam and Muslims, we wouldn't be over there. And none of them would be over here. Other countries don't have the same kinds of immigration practices that we have. You don't see a lot of Muslim people living in Japan. You also don't see anybody yelling and screaming about Japanese people being Islamophobic. Have you noticed that? There are a few countries on this planet, and there are a considerable number, that don't have any Muslims in it. And so are they Islamophobic, or have they simply chosen not to take part in everything that's going on? They're saying, we're weighing the cost and we don't think it's worth it. We're not going to be involved. but Americans have to bear the brunt of being so-called racist. Really? How can you dare say that? How can you fix your mouth to say that about Americans when we do everything that we do? If Americans were truly as racist as these quote unquote practitioners of Islam, the activist ones, are saying, then we wouldn't allow anyone who practiced Islam to serve in our government as an elected official. We wouldn't allow it. You know, when Americans get together on something and we're unified and of one mind, we've done it in the past and I believe we could do it again. We can make statements about what we believe and what we don't believe. So if that was the case, Americans would make that statement through their political processes and also through the simple note, there wouldn't be any Muslim teachers. Parents wouldn't allow it. There wouldn't be any, mayors who were Muslim or anything having to do with the public eye. We wouldn't have all of those visas from the Middle East, people coming over here on those tech visas, working in our companies and our corporations and bringing their families with them. They're here on HB2 visas. They wouldn't be here because Americans own the companies. If Americans were truly xenophobic and racial, they would say, yeah, put those HB2 visas in some other country, some country that's not in the Middle East, because none of those people are working for me. We wouldn't have anti-discrimination laws if we were racist, would we? Do racists vote for laws to constrain their own racism? Okay. All right. I'm not going to get worked up. We'll be back with Anastasia Boden for the Pacific Legal Foundation. I'm Stacey Washington.
She was a baby girl left abandoned on a doorstep in China. Our friends met her in that orphanage that had saved her life, and they adopted her. And believe me, she's not an orphan anymore. There are a lot of folks who have felt orphaned for much of their lives, either left behind or left alone. Maybe you know the feeling. Well, just like that little girl, someone went a long way to get you. Someone who chose you. He's adopted a lot of spiritual orphans into his family, and he's ready to adopt you too. Jesus said, I will not leave you as orphans. I will come to you. We've been cut off from the Heavenly Father by choosing to run a life that He was supposed to run, so we feel spiritually fatherless. But God's Son came all the way from heaven to that awful cross to pay for your sins and give you the chance to be His. You can belong to Him by saying, Jesus, I'm yours. It's something we'd love to help you do. Call us at 888-NEED-HIM or go to chataboutjesus.com. You will never feel orphaned again.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a legacy moment. Years ago, when our infant daughter died, Karen and I were devastated. Many friends heard about our tragedy and ministered to us at this point of incredible need. But there was one man who bugged me, to be honest with you. This fellow said, I have peace in my heart that this tragedy is not because you and Karen have sinned. I was offended by his attitude. He was arrogant and condescending, and it bothered me greatly. He seemed to think he had a corner on spiritual discernment. Not every tragedy, illness, or hardship is an indication of God's judgment. But some suffering and hardship is, in fact, God's instrument of judgment or discipline. Sometimes the only way God can get our attention is by allowing suffering and pain to visit us. In 2 Samuel chapter 21, David and the nation of Israel experienced an incredible famine. Listen to these words. Now there was a famine in the days of David for 3 years, year after year, and David sought the presence of the Lord, and the Lord said, It is for Saul and his bloody house, because he put the Gibeonites to death. God told David clearly, yes, in fact, this famine is due to Saul's great sin. Now David went on to make things right, but I want to make some observations for our benefit. Make past wrongs right before the Lord. Don't let things stay around. If you know there are wrong things you've done, make them right before the Lord. Look closely at yourself. What are your motivations? Are you living a pure life before the Lord? Take your sins to Christ and restore that communion with Him. Well, here's what I want you to remember today. Sin is serious business. We need to keep short accounts and thereby minimize the consequences of sin.
Legacy Moment is a production of Moody Radio.
You can download episodes of Stacy on the Right from the podcast page on AFR.net or UrbanFamilyTalk.com. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the program. Thank you so much for being with us today. We have just another minute. We'll be with our guest, Anastasia Boden, Senior Attorney for the Pacific Legal Foundation. Right now, I would love to delve into, and I have something super quick for our encouragement today. And so this one is one of my favorites because I love to meditate on how God loves us and how he sees us, and to try to get my mind off of what happens in the natural, which is what we think about ourselves, because we can be pretty negative. And so this is Jeremiah 31:3, and it says, I have loved you with an everlasting love. I have drawn you with loving kindness. These are the kinds of things that we can meditate on to get our minds off of what we may feel in the natural about ourselves and our shortcomings and our failings, and to focus our minds on the fact that God truly loves us and he cares for us and he appreciates us and he made us, he created us for relationship with him. So I loved you with an everlasting love. I have drawn you with loving kindness, Jeremiah 31:3, and that's the encouragement for today. All right, it's my pleasure to welcome our first guest in the program today, Anastasia Boden, Senior Attorney, Pacific Legal Foundation. Anastasia, thank you for joining in.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so let's talk about, well, first of all, I did discuss this a few days ago, but I didn't go into the details of the plan because all I heard was the government should be in charge of making sure that people get equal pay. And I immediately shut my ears off and was like, not today. And I knew that the person talking was Kamala Harris. Also, she has tons of bad ideas. Like, she's always having bad ideas. So I felt I'd pretty much covered it when I just rejected it out of hand. But apparently there are some details here.
There are. Under Kamala's plan, companies must now become equal pay certified in order to even do business in the United States. So what they have to do is show that there's no pay gap, or that the pay gap is not attributable to some factor like merit. So it places the burden on the company to prove that before even doing business. And there's more, too. In addition to that, they have to disclose things like how many women they have in leadership, and they have to disclose the pay gap even without regard to factors that might create a pay gap, like the level of experience of the women in the company, or how many hours they work, et cetera, educational history, et cetera. And on top of that, to boot, for every 1% pay gap there is in the company has to pay 1% of profits to the government. So that's
for them to do what with?
To make us equal.
What do they do with that money?
More of the same, and Kamala estimates that it's going to be billions of dollars to the government under this plan.
But how does that help women? If the company gives the money to the government and they haven't given it to the woman, and the men aren't getting it because they're already overpaid, according to Kamala Harris, the government gets the money, and then what? Like, this is out and out tyranny.
Well, and it's unnecessary, because study after study continues to show that any purported pay gap results from the voluntary choices of women related to what type of field they want to enter, how dangerous that field is, what type of flexibility it offers, what kind of leave choices it offers, etc. Women make choices that are different from men, and those choices tend to mean that they get paid less, but it's not a result of some sort of invidious discrimination. It's a result of women being able to choose lifestyles and jobs that suit them.
Okay. So you said it, and I was just thinking this to myself. One of the things that I've noticed, and since we've had children and now they're getting ready to fly the coop, and over these years that we've had them here at home, and I've interacted with other moms, whether it's the moms that I'm friends with, or the moms who are friends with my friends, or the moms who their kids are friends with my kids. I've noticed that there are so many ways that American women take advantage of the flexibility of the American workforce. I've seen everything from moms who work full-time, and I mean high-powered, they're out of town a lot moms, all the way down to moms who work every other week or 1 week a month because they share a job. They share one full-time job with 3 other women. So they get the benefit of working full time, but it's 1 week out of the month. and then they get to have the benefit of raising their kids and taking advantage of that, being able to, pick up from school and go on field trips and stuff like that. And I've seen, of course, women who work from home like I do, women who own their own businesses and they decide how much they're going to sell and how much time they're going to spend selling it. The level of command and control that American women have over how we interact with the workforce and our families is the envy of every other woman on the face of this planet. Why would Kamala Harris want to destroy that?
Well, I think you're exactly right. This is the freest female generation in history, and it's not the government's prerogative to come in and fix the consequences of women's voluntary choices. I mean, and this is just perpetuating the myth that women are being discriminated against when they're not. And I don't think that's empowering for women. This is supposed to be for women's benefit, but it's paternalistic. It's patronizing. It's not empowering. What's empowering is to do what you said, is to recognize that women have more choices than ever and are able to choose jobs as they see fit to live the lifestyle that they want.
So I think one of the other things that it's important for us to point out is that, and I know you've covered this, but I just want to reiterate it and get some more detail from you. So when you talk about the choices that women make in the workforce, which are contributing factors to making less money, studies that have been done by the Heritage Foundation and other places have shown that American women tend to take some time off when they have children. And while they're taking that time off to raise a child from, say, birth to age 3, where they're going to preschool, their male counterparts are still working 60 hours a week and have sometimes gone on to get a master's degree or other outside training and certifications. And so when the woman returns to work after 3 years off for her, one child, or does that multiple times over the course of her career because she has 3 children, that can add up to a significant pay gap for someone who they initially started off, they were neck and neck, but now the man has climbed the career progression much faster because he never took a break from working.
You're exactly right. And there's other factors, too. I mean, women just tend to take jobs that are less dangerous and less risky. And, of course, those jobs pay more. There's all sorts of factors. For example, Uber did a study about if it had a pay gap because they pay people based on an algorithm. They are completely neutral to if the employee is a man or a woman. And yet what they found, and they were surprised to find, is that there's a pay gap at Uber. And that's because men choose to drive at peak times when there are higher fares. They tend to drive more. They tend to drive at higher speeds, which means that they take more risk, but also take more trips. So there's all these factors that lead to a pay gap, again, that don't have to do with discrimination. It's just based on, natural things that lead to differences in pay.
Okay. I wasn't expecting that one, Anastasia. I was not expecting the pay gap to exist at Uber due to some of the things that now I readily will admit to the facts that you've submitted there, that women are not as big of risk takers as men, women are not as aggressive as men, and a woman may be more leisurely about being an Uber driver than a man would be. But you're saying that those factors actually contribute to a pay gap that is in this new company. Uber's new. This is not an old place. This is like a new place, and they're still seeing this persistent gap.
Right. Uber is, a new, tech-friendly, progressive company. And again, they are totally blind to how they pay employees. They don't care if you're a man or a woman. They just use a algorithm that just tracks when you drive, how much the fare is and what the fares were at that time. And they're finding that there is a pay gap at their company just because of the voluntary choices of their employees. It's no fault of their own.
So the person who drives maybe 3 fares an hour because they drive a little bit faster, or they choose fares in such a way, like you're strategizing, you're looking at the Uber app and you're accepting fares that will keep you in a certain radius so you can do more trips. You're going to make more per hour than someone who just leisurely picks up a fare here and there, or maybe doesn't kind of organize and strategize the actual work itself.
Right, or there might be peak times of day, times of day when they have, increased fares, so you get 2 times the amount of money. People have to pay 2 times the amount of money because there's more demand. And it just so happens that, men are choosing to drive at those times, maybe because women are driving themselves, to pick up their kids or what have you at those times. But there is this gender difference in terms of time of day. And, of course, how many hours they choose, or maybe driving late at night. Driving late at night might provide more money, but I think women naturally may be averse to that because we worry about our safety. So there's these factors, again, that all contribute to the pay gap, but don't mean that the company's discriminating.
I mean, that is fascinating. I've always found the different reasonings when they do these deep dive studies, especially the one that the Heritage Foundation did, where they went in and they looked at, they compared apples to apples. They found people who had identical degrees and identical kind of companies that they work for, and they were able to compare apples to apples, men and women. But they found that the women took more time off for child rearing, didn't work as many hours during the week, and didn't travel as much. And travel is associated with higher pay, especially the higher up you move. When you get into management, if you're traveling a lot, you're usually making more money. And so it's just an interesting thing that it would appear in Uber. Like, I was not expecting that. So how do Americans actually understand what she's proposing, or are they just listening to the headline and applauding because she sounds like she wants to do something?
Well, I tend to think that a lot of plans like this are virtue signaling, that people see it and they just, with their gut, they support it without fully looking at the details or thinking through the consequences on the economy. Recently, California passed actually a gender quota for boards of public companies. So now you must have at least one woman on the board of every company. And, Governor Brown, when he signed the legislation, he said himself, I think this is probably going to get struck down as unconstitutional, and it probably will. But he said, this sends a message to the public. So I think that's what politicians are interested in. They're just interested in sending a message and kind of, using that to get more popularity, and especially Kamala, who's now running for president.
But what if a company has a board of directors that's all men because they don't want any women on there? Like, what about the freedom of association? And I'm not saying that because there's anything wrong with women, but what if the men who are on that board actually have a camaraderie and a working relationship that's good, and they don't see a need to add anyone else? Or what about companies that have all women board of directors, where because of the product or because of the nature of what they're doing as a business, they feel like women would be better and that's work for them and they're making money, and so they don't want to make changes? Why is the government, how is the government adequately suited to make this choice for a business about who should be on their board of directors?
Well, you're exactly right. There's all sorts of reasons why boards might be composed a certain way. It might be that there's not a level of interest from one gender in that industry, or it might be that it's an ideological organization. Maybe it's a men's organization, or maybe it's a women's organization, and so they want to form their board in a certain way. And in fact, the law professor recently pointed out that I think it's something like 17% of boards with 5 members will, just as a matter of random chance, have a 0 or just 1 member, because, even if you weren't discriminating, you're just picking out of a hat, you would have very few of one gender. 17% of those boards would have very few of one gender, because that's just the way that random distribution goes. So there's all these reasons, non-discriminatory reasons. But also, even if you wanted to, if you just wanted to comprise your board that way, that is your right. We have freedom of association. We have freedom of thought in America, or at least we should. I get what you're saying. We should. And the other thing, I've served on, I think, 3 boards, but the one that I refer to the most often is the one I was elected to, and it was a school board. And so what the board is comprised of is there are more than one factor that goes into how you end up with a school board that has, whoever is on it. And we tended to, in that district, have older people on the board as opposed to younger people, because the younger people are raising their kids. So they're volunteering in the school district and they're doing things. But the older people who no longer have kids at home, or their kids are high schoolers, now have time opened up in their schedule to serve on the board, and they feel much more confident about doing it. So I was one of the younger people on the board. I was the only one who had kids in my age range on the Board of Education when I was there. But I was able to do it because I was a stay-at-home mom, and I'd already volunteered everywhere else. And so it kind of just naturally came to be that I was able to fill an appointment and then get elected. Since then, they have the age of the board has actually skewed even older, because as people retire from teaching, they want to serve on the board of the school that the district that they taught in.
So it's just one example of how this can work, where you literally have people, you're not able to kind of plan it to get a certain distribution of people, because those people aren't available to do it when you would be saying we need 3 more women and we need 2 more people in their 20s and 1 more person in their 30s. Those people don't want to do it.
Well, that's exactly right. And I think, what's next? The government's going to look at a board like that and say, hey, you don't have enough young people. You're discriminating against young people. Are they going to start determining what's the proper allocation of people based on traits like age or gender or race? Is that really the government's business to say, I think we should have at least one woman, one person under 30, one person of whatever race? I mean, that just serves to create more distinctions between us. It emphasizes distinctions between us that, it makes us feel different from each other in ways that aren't important, rather than downplaying those differences. It breeds resentment. And I think, then it makes people feel like quota hires. So then if there's a 1-woman quota, everyone, and there's 1 woman on a board, the other people on the board may assume that she's a quota fill, and that devalues, her earning her way there, which she may have done in the absence of a quota. It takes away the achievements that people make in the absence of government mandates. So that's why these quotas are really destructive.
And wrong. And I think you just totally wrapped that up for us perfectly. I hear the music. Anastasia, thank you for joining us today and giving us some of your time to explain this tough issue. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
All right, talk to you again soon. That was Anastasia Boden, Senior Attorney for the Pacific Legal Foundation. And I'm Stacey Washington. We'll be back with more.
This is Uncommon Moments. Here's former Super Bowl winning NFL coach Tony Dungy and his wife Lauren sharing from their book Uncommon Marriage.
For Lauren and me, longevity in our marriage is due to the examples our own parents gave us. They encouraged us to always look to God and the Bible for answers to life's questions.
But even with parents guiding you, so often in life and in marriage, we discovered that there isn't a clear path. After all, as the Apostle James wrote, how do you know what your life will be like tomorrow? Instead, we walk forward hand in hand and make a path, but we do it with God. That's the key.
So in those moments where you need guidance and maybe your parents or friends aren't there to help, God is always there, and you can go to Him anytime.
Tony and Lauren Dungy, authors of Uncommon Marriage, learning about lasting love and overcoming life's obstacles together. Discover more at CoachDungy.com.
One day I was using, it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I was dropped off where you catch the train. 9 o'clock at night, I came to, and I was still in the same place. I don't know what happened. I came to an adult and teen challenge. And with God in my life, I'm not the same at all.
If you or a loved one are struggling with addiction, Adult to Teen Challenge can help. There are centers across the country, and you can find the one nearest you at 855-END-ADDICTION or at TeenChallengeUSA.com. This is Urban Family Talk.
The church has to take the lead in ensuring that men are properly trained for fatherhood. We have an epidemic in which boys are not growing up with their fathers. So as Christian men, we have to stand in the gap and make up the hedge so that our communities are not destroyed. When we see fatherhood as a blessing and not an inconvenience, we will see children as spiritual weapons in our arsenal. Blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. Join us in the battle to strengthen fatherhood. UrbanFamilyTalk.com.
This is House Call for Health. More than 42 million health insurance claims were denied in 2017. And according to a new study, that's usually where the process ends. Less than 0.1% of denied claims were appealed by patients. Health insurance experts say this is a big mistake. A report by the California Chronic Care Coalition found that state health officers reverse more than 60% of claim denials. They cite one case of a man whose insurance company okayed payment for surgery and recovery, then changed its mind and refused to pay. The patient filed a grievance, and the company was forced to cover the claim. Health experts speak about step therapy, where insurers refuse to approve a doctor's course of treatment until other, less expensive options are tried and fail. There's a bill in Congress that would allow doctors to appeal these step therapy decisions. For more health news, go to foxnewshealth.com. House Call for Health, I'm Anna Eliopoulos, Fox News.
This is Stacy on the Right with Stacey Washington on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
The law very specifically states Section 214 of the Housing and Community Development Act of 1980. It says the HUD Secretary is prohibited from providing housing assistance to people who are in the country illegally. It further states that if it is discovered that the homeowner or the apartment leasee is harboring people who are illegal, the HUD Secretary has a duty to remove them. So if they don't like that, it's the law, they need to change that.
They could change the law.
But here's what I find fascinating. They're talking about evicting children. We've made a provision that people can get a 6-month deferral on action, and that can be renewed twice. That's 18 months. That's enough time for them to actually do something.
Wow. So he's put provisions in there, which to be completely frank, I wouldn't have put those in. Welcome back to the show, Stacey Washington. Head on over to stacyontheright.com and hit the subscribe button. I want you to know that if I was that person who was in charge of HUD and I was doing this in order to make a statement to make sure that people who are in the country illegally and living in government subsidized housing would understand that they can't ever do this again, I would not be giving them 18 months to figure out what to do. I wouldn't. Why? Because they're in the country illegally. Self-deportation is a goal. It's one of the ways that the goals of, or the actual execution of making sure that we don't have people in the country illegally can be attained. And that's by encouraging people to self-deport. And that is, well, it's kind of, you're taking away the teeth of the thing. If you're saying, well, in 18 months, you have to, no, you have 6 months. And that's it. 6 months and eviction notices are served, which is way longer than Americans get. When someone gets behind on their rent in the United States, usually it's 90 days and your landlord has the right to evict you. They're getting 18 months. Again, the double standard persists. Some people are more equal than others. Illegal immigrants are far more equal than American citizens. Do you not see that? I certainly see it. I think it is obvious that that's what's happening. So, yeah, we have to do our best to try to get something into place that's going to help and bring about the kind of result that we want. But if we don't do that, then we keep getting the same thing. So there was a devastating tornado here in Missouri last night, and we were so annoyed. And thank God everything was safe here around these parts. But there was a violent series of tornadoes that tore across Missouri, and 3 people were killed, and there's been extensive damage. Now, one of the reasons I know it was pretty bad is because we had this pro-life rally that was going to happen down at the Capitol in Jefferson City, and it was scheduled for tomorrow, Friday. And so a girlfriend of mine who's a pro-life warrior, Zena Hackworth, she was going down because she was going to speak there. And I said, hey, let me ride with you. It'll be fun. And so at dinner, a couple of our kids were like, oh, don't have anything to do tomorrow. I'm riding too. So we were kind of going to pile up in her truck and head down. Well, it's been canceled because of the tornadoes, because they were in Jeff City and the rally was to be held in Jeff City. So here are the details here. A large tornado tore through Jefferson City late Wednesday night around 11:45 p.m., and the National Weather Service in St. Louis issued a tornado emergency for the area after a violent tornado was confirmed on the ground. First responders actually worked through the night to begin search and rescue efforts for people who were trapped in collapsed buildings. They've confirmed that at least 20 citizens were transported to local hospitals. It was given a preliminary rating of an EF3 tornado on Thursday afternoon, meaning it had a peak wind speed of 160 miles per hour. 3 people were killed in Golden City, Missouri, after a tornado moved across the region Wednesday evening as well. There was also a tornadic thunderstorm which tracked from Ottawa County, Oklahoma, into Baxter Springs and Galena, Kansas, and then into Carl Junction, Oronogo, and Golden City, Missouri. Victims' identities will be released later. Actually, they're released this morning. Oh, wow. So it was Kenneth Harris and his 83-year-old wife, Opal, who were killed in the storm. Their bodies were found about 200 yards from their home. And then just west of Golden City, 56-year-old Betty Berg was killed when her mobile home was destroyed. Her husband, Mark, was seriously injured. So please remember them in your prayers. So Golden City and Jefferson City are actually about 3 hours apart. They have not yet really, like I'm looking here. Oh, here are some images of Jefferson City. Wow, it's pretty bad. So they put out a call this morning. The governor of Missouri said legislators don't need to be here right now. If you're planning on coming here for any reason, you should stay home. Don't come to Jeff City because they're trying to figure out how to get everything cleaned up. The governor, Mike Parsons, actually took an aerial tour of the tornado damage and ongoing flooding Thursday morning. He says it is a devastation to the state. And of course, the president issued a tweet. Our hearts go out to the people of Missouri as they woke up to assess the damage from storms. You are strong and resilient, and we are here to assist. Now, Jefferson City Mayor Carrie Turgeon also issued an updated declaration of emergency that was executed on May 22nd and related to the flooding of the Missouri River and its tributaries. So, this is pretty terrible. Some of the residents described the tornado as feeling like an earthquake, and there were a ton of different tornado warnings here in the St. Louis metro area, and we were, running up and down the stairs to the basement, carrying our dog, going back and forth. I think we were back up and down 5 or 6 times. We had 6 times the tornado warning siren went off. One of the times, me and one of the kids were outside walking on our street, and we had to try to hurry and get back in the house and get down into the basement. So rough stuff. I'm grateful that there wasn't more damage, but it's really sad to hear that 3 people lost their lives. So turning to the Democrats and their attempt to impeach President Trump. They're saying 2 different things here. And by the way, if you want to weigh in on this, I'd love to talk to you. 866-963-2037. 866-963-2037. You can call in and join the program. Pelosi has told her colleagues that Trump is a villain and that he wants to be impeached. Have you ever heard that kind of talk or seen it on a movie or something where someone who is an abuser says, well, you want me to beat you, or, you want me to hit you, or you want me to destroy our property? No, that person doesn't. President Trump does not want to be impeached. He wants you to stop harassing him. It's a huge difference. It's easy to determine. So the House Speaker's message to Democrats came as vocal support for impeachment rose among lawmakers in the caucus, but there's nothing but crickets out here in the hinterlands. Even in heavily liberal jurisdictions, Americans want to move on from the Mueller report. They're tired. They're ready to let go. She also says that the family of Donald Trump should have an intervention with him. And my question is, why does he need an intervention as opposed to her needing one? How is it that she's not having her family members have an intervention with her? Or even better, how is she not having an intervention with the Democrats who keep talking about impeachment, telling them that this is going to cost them the election? So 32 members of the House Democratic Caucus have so far voiced support for opening an impeachment inquiry into Trump. So I've heard a lot of talk. We need to follow the facts. We need to, we need to do this. We need to do that. We need to dot this I and cross that way. Yeah, you know what you need to do? You need to get back to governing. Start working on that budget. How about that? How about going to the budget and saying, this is something that needs to be rectified. We're borrowing $1 trillion more than what we bring in every year. That's unsustainable. Notice how nobody even talks about it anymore. So, yeah, turning to Alyssa Milano. So remember Alyssa Milano had said that there needed to be an intimacy strike. Women in America needed to refuse to be intimate with their boyfriends, relationships outside of marriage, and their husbands, and etc., because they need to teach men a lesson about supporting anti-abortion legislation, that to kind of activate men to be against abortion legislation by conservatives that seeks to make abortions harder to get. Now, there's a hard truth that we need to kind of accept here. And I think we've seen this a little bit. Now, I'm not speaking about our audience here at American Family Radio, but I'm going to, it's time to get a little bit heart to heart, a little bit real. The truth is, most Americans on both sides of the political aisle, they only boycott companies they don't use. So if a boycott involves a company that they like or a company that they actually enjoy using, like I've heard this from so many people about Target. And I am not saying this because I don't like the people who told me that or the people who are shopping at Target, but they like shopping at Target, and so they keep doing it. Even though they know when they're in there, they have a higher likelihood of being assaulted by some stranger in the store, open up and down the aisles, and that the bathroom policy of Target and the dressing room policy of Target puts them at risk. I've had people tell me, well, I just don't try on clothes there anymore, and I don't go to the bathroom there. And I'm like, wow. So you never have to go to the store, shop around, and then you have to use the restroom? You're saying you just hold it and leave the store? Why shop at a place where you can't use the bathroom? Anyway, so thinking of the boycotts of Starbucks, Target, Netflix, a lot of people are all the way in on those because they don't use Starbucks, Target, or Netflix. So if you do use those, you will go to them. And it doesn't matter what organization says to boycott them. And I find this to be a little interesting because I did use Netflix. Our whole family did. And giving it up was it was a big deal. Giving up Target was a big deal. Sometimes we still, like if our daughter works, she has a couple dresses still from there. Massimo dresses, in fact, that are Massimo dresses were under $29.99. And I'm not kidding you. The dresses are 5 or 6 years old because we haven't been in there in that long. And she'll wear it, like she'll be wearing it to church. I'm like, oh my goodness, that dress is so cute. I'm like, oh, is that one of your Target dresses? She's like, yep, it's one of the, I just have like 2 or 3 left. And it still looks good. I'm like, it sure does. It's still cute. And so, who doesn't miss that kind of quality and longevity in clothing and for those prices? I mean, I would love to shop there, but they just won't give in. In fact, they're moving further to the left. So, Alyssa Milano said that Hollywood should boycott Georgia. But it shows how out of touch she is because, at 46, it's been more than a decade since she was last on TV. So Georgia basically is now Hollywood East, right? 2016, Georgia surpassed Hollywood in TV and film production, ending a 95-year reign after those fur merchants moved their nascent movie industry from New Jersey to California. Filmmaker Ron Howard was appalled as the next Hollywood celebrity about Georgia's newly signed fetal heartbeat law, but he won't relocate the shooting of Hillbilly Elegy, which is slated to begin next month. Instead, he and his Imagine Entertainment partner Brian Grazer said they would boycott Georgia as a production center if the law takes effect as scheduled in January. In other words, after filming the Netflix movie starring Amy Adams has wrapped up. Ron Howard is all for boycotting Georgia once he's done making movies there. He'll go back to boycotting Chick-fil-A once he finishes ordering a sandwich. And the Georgia film industry has a much larger number of black filmmakers and black crew than any other state in the United States. So director Lexi Alexander tweeted out, "I find these suggestions a little careless. Who are you punishing?" Again, who is she trying to punish? Tyler Perry says he's not leaving Georgia. The Motion Picture Association of America said in a statement, film and television production in Georgia supports more than 92,000 jobs and brings significant economic benefits to communities and families. It's important to remember that similar legislation has been attempted in other states and has either been enjoined by the courts or is currently being challenged. The outcome in Georgia will also be determined through legal process. We will continue to monitor developments. In other words, business is business. That's political. We'll watch the news at night, but in the daytime, we're going to be filming film projects in Georgia. So, again, Alyssa Milano has to learn the hard lesson that we don't live in Milano land or the United States of Milano. We live in the United States of America, and she's just one little old person, and her opinion doesn't matter any more than any other one little of us people, and she can't determine what industries will operate in which states. I think it's kind of delicious that she's getting this comeuppance. The problem is, that's like saying, I just taught this cup a lesson. You can't teach inanimate objects lessons, and her brain is an inanimate object, unable to learn new things, incapable of accepting fresh information. So this lesson just flew right over her pretty little head. But the rest of us see it. The film industry's not leaving Georgia. She might as well get over herself. All right. You know what? You enjoy your evening. God bless from the Heartland. We have more right after this news break.
The sexual revolution is falsely promised to satisfy the human heart.
God has a better way if we follow God's prescription.
Dr. Michael Brown offers hope for those trapped in the downward spiral of sexual immorality. The Freedom of Sexual Purity is a powerful DVD from the AFA Cultural Institute. Get your copy today at afastore.net.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
For American Family News, I'm Chris Woodward. Cleanup continues in Missouri following another series of tornadoes that touched down last night. Jeff Manasso has more.
People who live in Jefferson City describe a tornado funnel as wide as it was high as it slammed Wednesday night through Missouri's capital city.
Herd of elephants right on the top of us. I've never seen one like this.
Leaving miles of homes and businesses damaged and destroyed, uprooted trees and downed power lines.
There have been no reported fatalities. The injuries, I've heard the number around 20.
Mayor Carrie Turgeon, 3 deaths reported from a tornado in Golden City, Missouri, 4 other deaths in the Plains and Midwest, where flooding has in some cases swallowed homes with evacuations in place. In parts of Kansas, Oklahoma, and Missouri. Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says her comments about the president's conduct are not to blame for a blow-up at the White House yesterday. Jared Halpern has more from Capitol Hill.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says she stands by her belief President Trump has engaged in a cover-up, but says that is not what abruptly ended a White House meeting about infrastructure.
That was not a reason that he did that yesterday. That was an excuse for him to do that. And with all due respect to your question, I do not intend not to honor my oath of office, nor do my colleagues in the House of Representatives.
Pelosi says while there could be impeachable offenses, right now the House is not on a course to impeachment. On Capitol Hill, Jared Halpern, Fox News.
An American who went to Afghanistan and became a Taliban fighter has been released from U.S. federal prison after 17 years. John Walker Lind was sentenced to 20 years, but some individuals and organizations believe he should have been given a much longer sentence. Meanwhile, Frank Gaffney of the Center for Security Policy thinks this may be just the first of many releases of people convicted of terrorism.
I fear that we're likely to find not only that jihadists like John Walker Lind will be operating amongst us, but they will be able to tie in with others. They will be able to inspire others to do the same.
Additional information is available at onenewsnow.com. More than a penalty flag is being waved for a Pennsylvania woman accused of an over-the-top response to a loud playing football broadcast.
A lot of people find loud audio annoying, but authorities say this reaction is out of bounds. A Pennsylvania woman's going to stand trial accused of beating her mother and shaving her head because she thought her mom had the radio volume too loud when she was listening to a Pittsburgh Steelers football game. A judge says Dolores Amarino is competent to stand trial, but that her daughter, a teenager also accused of taking part in the beating, is not competent and has to continue mental health treatment at a state psychiatric hospital. Both mother and daughter shared delusions of romantic relationships with members of the Steelers team. Sal Gianfresso, Fox News.
There's a high school valedictorian who made it to the top without a home. Ken Duffy has that story.
Tupac Mosley was #1 in his graduating class at Raleigh Egypt High School in Tennessee, achieving a 4.3 grade point average, and he did it under dire circumstances during the latter half of his senior year when he and his family were left homeless. The teen says his relatives fell behind on bills and lost their home after his father died, living in tents and other places ever since. But Mosley overcame the adversity, amassing college scholarships totaling $3 million, and will attend Tennessee State University in the fall on a free ride. Ken Duffy, Fox News.
And today's national average for a gallon of regular gasoline is $2.84. That's according to AAA, which says states out west are seeing above average gas prices. States paying below average prices are in the central and southeastern U.S. A gallon of diesel, meanwhile, will set you back $3.10 on average. Find more news at onenewsnow.com. We're also on Facebook, Twitter, and the One News Now mobile app for Apple and Android devices. Thanks for listening.
Stand by. The BSAC radio show spotlights Christian rap artists.
Never try to put me on the pedestal. The Lord is working on me. I'm getting better still.
Hear in-depth interviews and news about upcoming releases.
What's your motivation? Jesus, he's a motivation.
BSAC is the Biblically Sound Artist Coalition. Don't miss the BSAC radio show. Saturdays from 10 a.m. to noon Central on Urban Family Talk. She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
An hour before Democrat leaders were scheduled to go to the White House to meet with the president to talk about rebuilding our nation's infrastructure, the Speaker of the House actually accused the President of the United States of engaging in a cover-up.
There is an itch in our caucus for impeachment, but let's not deal with that yet.
It's not just the Speaker Pelosi. Adam Schiff done this for 2 years, lied to the American public. Chairman Nadler, people ought to look at this. When he ran for chairman of the committee, you know what he went to his Democrat friends to say why to vote for him? Because he was the best person to be in place to impeach the president.
And now, Stacey Washington.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you for sticking around. We have more fantastic content for you this hour on the program. We're going to be chatting with Everett Bartlett. He is actually the president of the Coalition to End Domestic Violence, and he's going to talk to us about the Violence Against Women Act, which actually will bring fresh violence to American women in spite of its title. And he's going to join us to explain exactly what all of that's about. We are also going to be digging into impeachment, and how the NRA and other gun rights groups are seeking to have a Second Amendment win based on some wrong-headed legislation that was enacted in New York State. So we'll talk about that as well. Right now, I want to go to the phones, and call lines are still open. If you have something you want to chat about from last hour or anything at all, bring it. Let's talk about it. 866-963-2037. 866-963-2037. Hey, Randy in Alabama. Thank you for calling the show.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for having me. How are you doing today?
Pretty good. How about you?
I'm doing well. I was just listening to everything you said, and your screener asked me, what do you want to talk about? And I said all the above of everything that you were just talking about. But I've been on Twitter for a year and a half, and I'm a special ops veteran, so obviously I love my country like no other. And I got off Twitter about 3 weeks ago, maybe a month ago, because what I found myself doing was exactly what they're doing. Because make no mistake about this. This is good versus evil.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about Democrat versus Republican. This is good against evil. And the Democrats know exactly what's coming. They know what we all know. They know what, everybody's been saying on Fox News for the past year, to the point where it's just like, get on with it already. Start the indictments. We all know what happened. And they're, what Nancy Pelosi, what you were just talking about earlier when she said, they need to have an intervention. The family needs to have an intervention with Donald Trump. I mean, it's ludicrous. It's insanity. And the reason that I got off of Twitter is because, like I was saying, is that I was bringing myself down, because I'm on Twitter, saying negative things about Nancy Pelosi, saying negative things about Cohen with the bucket of chicken when Barr didn't show up.
Mm-hmm.
All this is to bide time, and try to get him impeached before the hammer comes down. And make no mistake about it, when this comes down, what's getting ready to happen, America has never seen this before, and America's not going to be prepared for this. And I'm not, chicken little, the sky has fallen. I just, from things that I've read, from homework that I've done over the past several years, is it's going to get real ugly real quick. And I guess I wanted to say to everybody out there, whoever's listening, is that, don't fall for what the Democrats' tricks are. Don't fall for the Alyssa Milano, because all they want to sow is division and hatred in America. President Trump is the best thing that's ever happened to this company. I don't care if I'm not a Republican, I'm not a Democrat. I'm an American, and I'm for our military. So whoever's going to be in office that is going to help our military achieve its goals, that's who I'm going to vote for. And for 8 years, Barack Obama did not have any clear rules of engagement for the soldiers that were on the ground in Afghanistan. In Iraq, it doesn't matter. He had no clear rules of engagement. And if you're a soldier, if you don't have those, you're flying a ship in the middle of the night and you don't know where the port is. So I just hope everybody really, sits back and takes a look around and see what's really happened. And Trump has done nothing wrong. These people have done nothing wrong, and they're going to rue the day once these indictments start and get handed down. And I really want to thank you for taking my call, ma'am.
Oh, sure. And Randy, thank you for your service. I really appreciate you joining in and sharing that with us today. So one of the things that I really struggle with is whether or not to continue on Twitter. I think I have 67 or 68,000 followers on there, and they kind of clamp down on me with the algorithm. So I don't have any growth there. I do tweet every day, but I'm not on there 24/7 like I was when I was getting, 1,000 followers a day and, 1,000 followers a week at some points. I was on there hours out of the day, and it was unsustainable. I also found the same thing that Randy was just describing, where it just was sucking the life out of me. I felt like some nights I'd argued and I'd fought and I just had so much interaction, but most of it was negative. And even when I would have a good, interaction where someone said, okay, fine, I agree with you, or okay, fine, you made your point, after hours of tweeting back and forth with people, and sometimes it would go on for days, the same 2 or 3 people arguing points, or I would be live tweeting an event or live tweeting something that I was watching, and they're coming in with all of these criticisms and personal attacks. And it kind of makes you psychotic and paranoid and unhappy. And so I took a much lighter tack after that, where I want to grow, but I don't want to do so at the expense of my sanity. And so my account doesn't grow anymore. And I have been I feel like I'm supposed to be moving towards less of the social media giants where they're in control of what my access is, and back to my original place, which was stacyontheright.com. And if you look at the older posts from when the blog first started, I would post there 3 times a day. And it was my primary place to put stuff. And people knew if they wanted to see what I was up to, they would go there and read whatever I'd written or the video I'd posted, or, and it was much more witty and pithy, and there were fewer fights because it just was the way it was back then. And I feel like I'm supposed to kind of go back to that, because as much as we fight and as much as we are going against what the social media giants are doing, their orientation is not such that they're not engaged in a conversation with us or a debate. They're closing the loop. They're closing the circle. And at some point it becomes so tight that you're no longer in it, right? So I'm not saying I'm going to leave Twitter permanently or Facebook or anything like that, or, to kind of disengage from it. But maybe the primary place for me to post my thoughts and stories and all of that isn't there. Maybe the place where I can ensure that if you go to stacyontheright.com, there's no algorithm that prevents you from logging into that site and reading what's there. And you can share it wherever you want to, but you can always get to it. And if you sign up and you say, I want notifications, then you can get notifications, and there's no algorithm that says, I'll show you stacyontheright.com content, but then I won't show it to you for 2 years. That's happened to so many people on the Facebook page, which has 82,000 followers and 80,000 likes. And the majority of those people don't get anything from the page. Even right now, we're live streaming there, and our live stream has been clamped down to, we used to get solid 3,000, 4,500 was a great day. 7,800 was an even better day. Now we have 1,000 views, basically the bare minimum. Now, some of that is a function of people hitting the share button. If you're watching the live stream and you don't share it, then of course it's not going to grow. It's the same thing with people who listen on radio. If you're listening to the show on terrestrial radio and people don't know that you like American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk, then no one ever finds out that they should be listening to us too. Now, I know that's not the case. I know our terrestrial listeners share and are really plugged in. And of course, after Share-a-thon, I can't criticize y'all. Y'all threw down. It was a total party over here. And I should say in Tupelo at AFR. But it's just a really interesting time. Maybe the social media giants will become more equitable, but it doesn't look like that's what's going to happen. And so the best thing to do is just to have an outlet that is completely separate from what they are and what they do. And I know for some people, especially if you've done this for a while, you know that you can have a great blog. It can be fantastic, but there are millions and millions and millions of blogs. And so one way to distinguish yourself with your blog is to post content from your blog on social media, to send it to Twitter, send it to Facebook, and then you can get tons of hits in one day. If it's a good thing that you post, a good article, a good video, whatever, and it gets shared to Facebook and it goes viral, you can get, 100,000 hits in a day on your blog. And so that's why people don't want to give up Facebook. But I know that our audience here is many, 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 many times larger than my social media audience. And my social media audience is minuscule in comparison to our listening audience on terrestrial radio and the live stream and the podcasts. I mean, we're talking much larger by it's not even a comparison. My social media is a blip compared to that. And so maybe the best thing to do is put the content over there to make sure that it's somewhere that you can always see it, as opposed to trying to navigate through Facebook and get through their little notifications process. Because they've kind of lulled us into this thing where if you don't get a notification, it doesn't exist. If it doesn't show up in your timeline, it doesn't exist. But that's not the truth, is it? I exist outside of Facebook. My work exists outside of their algorithm and their timeline. Whether I'm in the timeline or not, I'm still running around doing stuff out here. I'm still doing a radio show. We exist outside of it. And maybe that's the point. I don't know. I don't know. Kind of drives me a little crazy. So I have some good news for the Stacey on the Right Show family, and I think it's appropriate to share at this point. Demetrius Minor is our associate producer here on the show, and he's a good friend of mine. My whole family, my husband and the kids and I, we consider him to be a close member of our family. And so I have a couple of announcements to make. First of all, Demetrius will end his booking duties. He books guests for us, and occasionally he'll still, forward us some information about guests, but he will be giving that role up on the last day of this month. And he also has shared with us, and we have celebrated, and it's now appropriate to share with you, that he has become engaged. He asked his girlfriend to marry him, and she said yes, and they will be getting married later on this year, I think. I don't know the date or anything. I'm just waiting to hear more details. So congratulations to Demetrius and Raisa. Beautiful couple. I'm so excited for them. And I feel like, of course, I always say I'm your marriage grandma because I've been married for over 20 years. And if you are just getting in that, I'm your marriage grandma. But I'm so excited for him because it's been a long journey for him to go from where he was and finishing his degree and then working for Americans for Prosperity and now getting engaged. And God has been so good and he's just blessed in so many ways. And I wanted to make it official and congratulate him on the air. And in addition to making the announcement about him moving on from the show, we're so excited for him. I'm really proud of him and what he's been able to do. And it's just going to be, I'm just looking forward to more wonderful things from him and his fiance at this point as they move forward in taking all these life steps. So much fun. Congratulations, Demetrius and Raisa. I'm so happy for you both. And I'm going to be praying that everything goes smoothly and beautifully and just, everything. So I wanted to make that announcement today and share it. And just so nice. It's just so nice. So when we come back, we are going to be digging into a little bit more here on the show. Actually, we're going to have our next guest. We're going to be speaking to Everett Bartlett. He's the president of the Coalition to End Domestic Violence. And this is in his wheelhouse because of Nancy Pelosi's new bill called H.R. 1585. It actually contains gun control. It is going to be utilized to make it the law of the land that men who think they're women can compete against women in sports and that they can use the same restrooms and changing facilities in public at pools and wherever, the gym, that young women and girls and women and their children will have to change with biological males and everyone will be in the nude. I mean, you know how it is at the pool. This is what Nancy Pelosi wants to push onto you. So he's going to come on and explain a lot about that. All right, we have more after this. I'm Stacey Washington.
It's amazing but true. When it comes to one of America's biggest household expenditures, healthcare, a lot of people think they've got no choice. People are used to thinking we have to do it this way, but they don't. Yes, you have the freedom to choose an alternative with your healthcare. It's MediShare, and it costs way less than the alternatives. The typical family saves $500 a month, not a year, a month. And if you're single, this can save you a lot too. And let's face it, a big reason MediShare is 400,000 people strong, it just works. They've shared over $3 billion in medical bills, so they can help share your needs too. Joining MediShare for so many people is one of those things that makes you say, why didn't I do this before? So yes, the time has come for something better. Look into joining MediShare and see why so many people are opting out of the old way and into the new. Why not look into this? Just call 855-PSALM-23. That's 855-PSALM-23. 855-PSALM-23.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson. Astute political observers frequently notice the large gap between rhetoric and reality. That is certainly true of some of the Democrat governors in blue states. Their political rhetoric has been critical of the Trump tax reform. The reality is that their state budgets have benefited significantly from those tax cuts, along with the Trump administration deregulation. Fortunately, the editors of the Wall Street Journal collected the news stories and economic numbers to show that blue states are actually receiving a blue state dividend. A rising economic tide is lifting those states in ways that aren't often acknowledged. For example, the governor of California recently was able to revise the Golden State budget to include a $21 billion surplus. That is already a few percentage points higher than the projection just a few months ago. Illinois reported earlier this month that the individual and corporate tax revenues exceeded internal forecasts by more than $1 billion. That should eliminate most of the state's budget gap for this year. These are not the only examples. The Pew Charitable Trust noted that tax revenues in 41 states have hit records even after accounting for inflation. Revenue was up in blue states like California, New York, Connecticut, and Washington. Of course, it was also up in red states like Tennessee and Texas. At least the Pew report acknowledged that this significant and extended stretch of growth was due to the federal Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. The increased revenue to these states was due to favorable economic conditions and robust stock returns. One more point is worth mentioning. While these state budgets have received a dividend from tax cuts and deregulation, the citizens of those states should not expect that this dividend would be passed on to them. Politicians in those states were merely going to find another way to spend that additional revenue. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kirby's booklet, A Biblical View on Anti-Semitism, go to viewpoints.info/anti-Semitism. Viewpoints.info/anti-Semitism.
You can watch a live stream of the show on Facebook or YouTube at Stacy on the Right. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Hey, welcome back to the program, everybody. It's good to be back with you. Happy Thursday to you. I hope your day is going awesome. Right now, it's my pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. We have Everett Bartlett. He's the president of the Coalition to End Domestic Violence. Everett, thank you for joining in today.
My pleasure, Stacy. Good to chat with you.
Oh, I'm so glad to have you on about this topic because I'm feeling kind of frustrated that this is what the Democrats are working on. It's as if they're on a mission to roll back every positive thing that American women have achieved or accomplished, or, you know, things that were kind of hard fought for us as women, like sports programming that's just for women. All of that goes away if they get their way.
Well, you're right. There's a huge amount of craziness going on right now in Washington, D.C., and domestic violence definitely is a good example of that.
So let's talk a little bit about this bill. Let me get the details here. It's H.R. 1585, and it's named Violence Against Women Act. And what we need to do is call our senators and urge them not to negotiate on this because it's already passed the House.
Well, it really is an act of lunacy and craziness, and I've been observing the Washington D.C. scene for a good 20 years, and I've never seen it as crazy as it is right now. Let's talk about this particular bill that came out of the House of Representatives just last month, and there is so much there that's just wacky. It's hard to know where to start, but I'll give you just a couple examples. So when people think about what is domestic violence, they think of something physical, some kind of physical violence, a spouse hitting or threatening or harming his or her partner. And by the way, we know now that domestic violence is an equal opportunity problem. And this is a shock to some people. The latest survey found that men are now more likely to be victims of domestic violence than women. So that's just sort of a very interesting factoid that we need to think about. But let's go back to this bill that came out of the House. It radically redefines domestic violence. So it's no longer something that's just hitting somebody or shoving somebody or slapping somebody. It now includes 4 new pieces, and let me spell this out. The first new part of this definition is emotional abuse. Okay, so emotional abuse includes, calling your partner a name, a nasty name. Well, nobody's saying that's a good thing, but do we really want to consider that as a domestic violence crime that will justify the police knocking on your door, coming in with handcuffs, putting somebody in jail?
Everett, I'm right there with you because what happens is, and I've seen this in couples, the couples who fight in public. I have seen women, having disagreements with men in public where the name calling was coming from the woman. and the man is just kind of standing there or sitting there taking it. And the woman is verbally abusive, profane, and it is actual emotional abuse. So we're saying that in any instance, in any time someone calls someone a name, as wrong as that is also going to be domestic violence?
Well, I'm just telling you the actual language of this bill, and that's the term is emotional abuse. And guess what? It doesn't even define emotional abuse. So it really is anything, anybody wants it to make it to be. And that's just for starters. All right, let's go on. Verbal, emotional abuse. So have you ever treated your partner to the silence treatment, or have you ever been treated? Have you ever received the silence treatment? Well, the silence treatment is definitely a form of emotional abuse. Again, do we want the police arresting people because they gave their partner the silence treatment? I definitely hope not. Our jails are already brimming with too many people who are there for minor things. But it doesn't stop there. Another part of this new expanded definition is what's called technological abuse. What is technological abuse? Well, it's sending a text message to your partner that has something offensive in there. Well, I think it's fair to say every American has received a text message from their partner that was, irritating or offensive. And then finally, last but not least, it's financial abuse. So if you told your partner, hey, I don't want you to bounce the checks anymore. I don't want you to overspend our credit card limit. It's hard to say these things and not burst out laughing. They're so ridiculous, but that truly is what's in this bill that just came out of the House of Representatives.
So, Everett, we're talking about policing the behaviors of people in the home that are not actually against the law. Because how many men out there are sitting here listening and thinking, I kind of wish I could get the silent treatment sometimes. Like, I'm getting a little bit too much lip. I'd like the silent treatment. Or how many women out there are thinking, when I'm angry, I'm working through some issues. My husband and I, we argue like on TV, but then afterwards we make up and we go on about our business. And what they're doing is they're saying anytime someone offends you in even the slightest little way, and you're in a relationship with them, you can dial 911. Now, we already have people dialing 911 because the McDonald's ice cream machine is broken and stuff, like stupid stuff like that. But this would escalate it to the point where 911 would cease to be something that you could use.
Well, you're totally correct. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say this kind of approach could potentially render serious harm to the family unit, because we're really inviting people to criminalize these. Every relationship, every partnership has these relationship ups and downs. That's just part of a relationship. And if they're really concerning, that's why we have counselors, we have marriage counselors, we have couples therapists who specialize this, and they're very helpful. They do a very good thing. So, do we really want the police being called into these cases? Do we want these cases hauled before a judge? Judge, I've been the victim of the silence treatment for the last 3 weeks, and I now deserve a restraining order. Well,
okay, that's a lot of willpower doing the silent treatment for 3 weeks. I just got to say, just speaking from my own experience, the silent treatment, how does one get past even like a few hours of that? Anyway, can we just talk about what this really is? Because I actually don't think that Democrats care whether or not I'm getting the silent treatment for my husband, or if he, sent me a mean text or told me, you can't buy any more cowgirl boots. I don't think they care. What I think they care about is putting forward bills that are so outrageous that it distracts us away from the issue at the border, our problems that we're having with, major trading partners like China, the saber rattling by Iran, the Russians flying 2 bombers into our airspace again and having to be escorted out by some of our fighter jets. and so many other problems, opioid epidemic, the vaping problem that we're having with teenagers getting, hooked on vaping and then escalating to cigarettes, obesity issues that we have here in this country. We have so many different things that Congress could be working on, our budget, the $1 trillion a year that we borrow. Instead, they're working on this, which is a appropriate distraction because it motivates their voters and it turns the rest of us off.
Yeah, I agree with you, Stacy. There's so many political agendas, and there's so much ideology at work here. You mentioned the border crisis, and I totally agree. There is a true crisis going on here, and let's connect this to the Violence Against Women Act. So this law has long had a provision that has allowed foreign nationals to simply say, "Oh yes, I was abused," and that moves them to the front of the line to get a green card and eventual U.S. citizenship. And everybody is now recognizing that's hugely problematic because anytime you reward false allegations, people will start to make more of them. And so now we have a lot of American citizens who have been accused, they have a relationship, they may be married to a foreign national, and now they find themselves accused of domestic violence, and surprise, they find that they have fewer rights to defend themselves against this allegation than that foreign national. And that's just plain wrong. And if this bill that just came out of the House does not address that problem or that crisis at all.
So there's that, and there's also that any foreign national can accuse you of, there's different things they can accuse you of and completely wreck your life. And then later when it's found, because if they think you're persecuting them and they accuse you of it, then they have this investigation launched and they get to stay in the country. And then once it's found to be false, they've already gotten to stay and they're not deported. And the whole purpose of it is to launch an investigation so they can stay in the country. That's, again, such an abuse of our system and abuse of power. It's total tyranny, and it shouldn't be done. You also have here that the Violence Against Women Act bill would dramatically increase unemployment insurance. How would that work?
Well, so it all goes back to these radically expanded definitions. So now let's just go with the verbal abuse concept. And by the way, we're not saying verbal abuse is good. We're just saying this really does not need a criminal justice response. But let's say a person does say that I've been a victim of verbal abuse, and for whatever reason they leave their job, quit their job. Well, if they say, well, I'm the victim of verbal abuse, they now there's a new entitlement in the Violence Against Women Act that says, oh, well, you can receive state unemployment benefits by virtue of being a victim of verbal abuse. And so we're talking about untold billions of dollars. Nobody's done the calculation because it's so big, but we're talking about billions of dollars for unemployment insurance benefits for people on the basis that they were emotionally abused. Does that go too far? I think it does.
Wow. I mean, it just keeps getting worse, the more you describe it, but you're not done. It also says here that the Violence Against Women Act would force shelters to house any man who self-identifies as a woman, with women and girls who are victims of sexual assault and abuse.
So, yeah, the possibilities got even more bizarre. So you and your listeners may have heard of the Equality Act that, again, just passed the House last week, and it would confer greater rights on transsexuals. So combine that with the Violence Against Women Act bill that came out of the House in April. So, yes, you could have exactly that scenario where abuse shelter, where a biological male, but now who identifies as female, could demand entrance into an abuse shelter and be spending the night in the abuse shelter with biological females. It does kind of boggle the mind. I was actually there. I witnessed the debate in the House of Representatives, and actually that point was actually raised in the debate, and the Democrats on the Judiciary Committee just poo-pooed the issue and said, well, that's just a non-issue.
Oh, a non-issue, you say? Because when you run away from home from an abusive boyfriend or husband and you're staying in a women's shelter, the last thing you want to see is a man. Even if he's dressed up as a woman, you're not looking for any male contact at all. I mean, we that's why they're women's shelters, and that's why they don't hire men to work there except as security guards or staff who can, do the heavy lifting. But they don't have men in the female living quarters because they're concerned that women will be, they'll be afraid.
Yeah. Well, let's actually peel back another layer of the onion here, Stacy, because there is really a huge ideological agenda behind the Violence Against Women Act. And what is that ideological agenda? Well, the belief of the advocates of this bill is that we live in a horrible patriarchal society, right? And that patriarchal ogres, the way they maintain their power and control is they engage in domestic violence. Now, if that's not ideologically based, I don't know what is, because we know the reasons why people engage in domestic violence. And as I said earlier, it's just as likely a woman, or even actually more likely to be a woman who is the perpetrator. And why does that happen? Well, there's three common reasons.
We have the music going, so we probably can't get to the three common reasons. But I wanted to say thank you so much, Everett Bartlett, president of the Coalition to End Domestic Violence. We will chat with you again. Have a fantastic weekend. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Stacy. Good to talk to you.
Good to talk to you, too. All right, we will have more for you. I'm Stacey Washington, and this is American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Hi, this is Steve Tiber with 8 Days of Hope. We've been all over the country helping disaster victims who lose everything.
It's truly a blessing. I really don't have the words to express.
And yet they see a glimmer of hope when a volunteer shows up.
Building the home, that's the second reason we're here. The number one reason is to share the gospel and give them hope.
It's everything that's right in America. I mean, it really represents the best that we have to offer.
That's one of the main reasons for doing it, is being able to be the hands and feet of Jesus and coming out and working with so many wonderful volunteers.
I just feel like it's important in this day and age to teach a child how to serve.
Please go to our website, 8daysofhope.com, and click on Get Involved. Submit your email address, and the next time we go anywhere with a disaster, we'll invite you to come along as well.
I love coming in the job room because you can see these pieces of paper. They aren't just a piece of paper. Right. It's a family that's hurting, and it's a gospel opportunity.
I just thank God, for this moment. I mean, I'll be back in my home, and I know it's going to be awesome.
Come love others with 8 Days of Hope.
I'm Will Addison, Director of Urban Family Talk. We desire to be a movement of time tellers. In 1 Chronicles 12:32 it says, the sons of Issachar were men who had understanding of the time, to know what Israel ought to do. In these perilous times, God is raising up a people of discernment who will see, pray, and act. We sound the alarm as watchmen. We cry aloud that God's people may be activated for his service. Join the movement at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Hi, friends. There's a new show in town on Urban Family Talk, nightly, 7 p.m. Central. Join me, C.L. Bryant, as we build the bridge to conversation throughout our great nation, the greatest nation on the face of the planet, the greatest success story the world has ever known. Nightly, the C.L. Bryant Show over Urban Family Talk, 7 p.m.
The Dean's List with Janice Dean.
A Port Authority cop from New Jersey that helped a legendary baseball player makes today's Dean's List.
Officer Brian Cooney had heard about how desperately kidneys were needed across the country. That's when the officer decided to start the matching process and ended up sparking a donor chain that led directly to Mets legend Ed Kranepool. After about 10 weeks of testing, Officer Cooney was told he was a match to a firefighter. As part of a registry exchange program, the firefighter's wife then agreed to donate one of her kidneys to a stranger, which happened to be a match for Mr. Kranepool. Doctors say that Officer Cooney's donation freed up 2 other kidneys that would go to people on the donor registry. Mr. Kranepool has been on the transplant list for almost a year, but because of his age and physical condition, it was unlikely he would receive a donation unless it was a private donor. But the slugger never gave up hope that his day would come. Thank you, Officer Cooney, and to Ed, you are in our prayers too. Janice Dean, Fox News.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Look, I was in California over the weekend talking to people, and the number of women who came up to me and said they're really worried because they think their daughters are not going to be able to have a successful women's sports program because of the drive of the Democrats to basically allow transgender males to dominate women's sports. And I don't think people have realized yet what an assault this is going to be on women and on their right to compete. But that's the sort of thing you're not going to get Vogue magazine to print, and you're not going to get the New York Times to print. And that's why it takes a while. The country gradually recoils after the left-wing establishment has done all it could. And I think you're going to see that kind of recoil on 8 or 10 or 12 issues this coming year.
Wow. So this is definitely one of those prescient moments by Newt Gingrich. And he says that left-wing Democrats want to erase all of our memories of America. They want to take what we have built up, and they want to change it and make it into something different. And I'm not actually one of those people who feels like we can't change anything or we can't improve anything, but this is not an improvement. And I don't see this as a good faith type of a thing. I mean, do you see this as being something where these people are actually doing this in good faith? I don't think this is done in good faith. Now, perhaps there's a bit of like, there's no way to justify it. Like, if you try to think about it and you say, could it be good or could it be something? You can't. There's nothing good to find in it. Women and girls in shelters unable to go to sleep at night because there's transgendered men there. And remember, what kind of sick person do you have to be to go into a women's shelter? So you're a man, you think you're a woman, and you want to go into a women's shelter with women and young girls who've already been victimized. For what purpose? Now, we all know that it's an exercise in futility to try to understand mentally ill people and the reasoning behind what they do. But is Nancy Pelosi mentally ill? What about the people who passed this out of the House? Are they mentally ill? Did they not read it? Or is this just an effort for them to pass something that they know that the Republicans won't like so they can annoy Republicans and annoy, basically anybody who's not on their team? What about all the Democrats? Aren't there Democrats out there who are annoyed by this? I mean, honestly, if you're a Democrat, you're listening right now, can you call and justify why women and girls in abuse shelters should be forced to be with a man with man parts in the same facility that they're in? Please call in. The number is 866-963-2037. We have, a full 11, 12 minutes left for you to, and I'm not saying it I'm not being sarcastic. If you really believe this is a good idea, please explain how it's a good idea to the rest of us so we can see your thought patterns and your reasoning. It will help us to understand why this is something that they passed out of the House. I'm not saying I'm changing my mind on it. I'm saying if you want to, you can explain, and we will definitely listen, and I will not cut you off. I will allow you to explain why this is something that is good reason. a good thing to do. 866-963-2037. 866-963-2037. So, wow, it feels exhausting. Don't you get that feeling? Do you feel like it's almost as if someone is playing a game with you? A mean game, a game that you can't win. So let's go to the phones. Kelly in Alabama. Hey, Kelly, thanks for calling the show.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. So what if your abuser, if you're a woman in a domestic, like if you're in a safe house,
mm-hmm.
and the abuser wants to get to you and he says he's a woman?
Oh, okay, Kelly. See, that's what I'm talking about. This is what I'm talking about. Wow. So I'm saying wow because I hadn't even thought about that. I was just thinking about strangers. You're talking about a man who already beat the woman up and she's run away from him and he comes to the shelter and says, I'm a woman. And then she comes out of the shower or something and there he is.
Yeah.
Wow. That could happen. We can't rule that out.
Well, I mean, how could you stop him? That would be discrimination or whatever.
It sure would. Yeah, he would be like, they're refusing to let me in, and they're a women's shelter, and they should have their funding yanked. If they have any kind of like government funding or they're maybe in a building that they're leasing from the government or something like that, he'd be able to basically destroy this option for women who need a place to stay. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like I'm in a world where I'm going to wake up, and I've just been dreaming the last couple of years how Trump has been treated and the country's been.
Me too. Don't you? So the other day, you know what? The other day, Kelly, I had a dream. It was the other night. I had a dream, and it was so real that I thought when I woke up, I was still in it. And that's what this feels like. This feels like something like when you read these news stories, it's so weird. You're almost like, okay, because you're looking down. I'll scroll to the bottom and I'll say, is this a like one of those parody sites? Is this the Onion or whatever that's called? And the other part about the kind of weirdness of it is that you read the title of the story, like when the story came out about the poop maps all over for San Francisco. I thought this can't be real, but it's real. The mile-high pile of garbage in Los Angeles that they can't get hauled away, that's real. Typhus, typhoid, that's real. I mean, it's so odd, but it's real. Lisa in Texas. Hey, thanks for calling the show today.
Hey, Stacy. I was just thinking about what Kelly was saying, that the abuser of the woman can come into the shelter, but it could just be any predator, any kind of predator, just like what's happening in Target bathrooms and dressing rooms. This will just legalize it everywhere, all over the country. These victims, these women that have been abused and the children. And then you have someone that just, I'm the woman today, and they can have access. I mean, I think there's a story already in a prison, a rapist who says she's a woman who's now in a women's prison, who's been convicted of rape.
How did he get into the women's prison? Oh, he said he was a woman.
Because, I can't remember which state, but it was a state that acknowledged that if you say you're a woman, And I mean.
So this means if you're a rapist and you pay attention to the news, you just only need to wait for the nincompoops in your state's government to fix it so you can get close to all the women. You've raped and you've done whatever. You don't want to be in prison with the men because the men hate you because you're a rapist. Because as I understand it in prison culture, the people at the bottom of the totem pole are rapists and pedophiles. They get no respect from any of the other prisoners because the other prisoners, whatever they are, they're not rapists and they're not pedophiles. So it's like a pecking order and you're at the bottom. So you get beat up, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So how to get away from it? We'll get into women's prison by saying you identify as a woman, and then not only are you safe from the men who are beating you, beating the stuffing out of you, but you also then can have access to women who you can rape because you're a rapist.
Exactly. And you think about that in any women's shelter anywhere in the country if this bill passes. And I sometimes just think all of these things are just to get people so distracted and so upset that because they're so afraid of the hammer coming down with all of these investigations into the state and the,
Yes, Lisa. Yes.
Look over here.
Yes, you're so right. It's the investigations is what's got them running scared. So they're like, they have a tick. I think it's like a tick where if someone has a nervous tick, and God bless you, I'm not mocking that, but I'm saying if there's a nervous tick for the Democrats, it's impeachment. Like they say it involuntarily. They can't help themselves. And when they're not talking about impeachment, they have these weird, strange ideas. This bill has zero chance of passing the Senate. Like I can't imagine a world, even Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins, who are rhinos who vote for anything that has to do with women, they side with the Democrats. Even those two would look at this and be like, now, wait a minute now. I ain't voting for that. So it's not getting through the Senate. So what's the point? It's a distraction tactic. It's so crazy that I'm right there in the thick of it. Guilty as charged. You can ring the bell over here at Stacy on the Right. I'm talking about this on the air. I'm talking about it and bringing attention to it. And as long as we're talking about this, we're not talking about what Lisa just said, the investigations. How now that we have the information from Papadopoulos and Carter Page, and we know what Comey wrote in his book, we know for sure that there just has been, not only was there no collusion, they knew all along there was no collusion. They used the dossier so they could spy on Trump, and they were enjoying themselves. Just like on TV, when they show somebody spying on somebody else, the spy is always enjoying themselves. That is what we have seen here. Oh, y'all, come on. We have a few minutes left if anybody else. The calls today have been brilliant. All my faves calling in, Lisa, Kelly. 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. So, yeah, I don't mean to make it sound like, that there's not, but again, things they want to distract away from, because I'm a little discombobulated because I just can't believe this story, but it says the Bay Area has the third largest homeless population in the United States, the report finds. It's a homeless epidemic that, wow. So you have in San Francisco a homeless epidemic that contrasts against the fact that 1 in every 11,600 residents is a billionaire. And the annual household income necessary to buy a median priced home now tops $320,000. So that's what's driving the homelessness. Now, again, Democrats are always talking about how the rich need to be soaked. Why doesn't San Francisco simply raise the taxes on anyone who's a billionaire? This is a local issue. It wouldn't have to go through the federal government. They don't have any Republicans in charge to stop them. They could levy a tax on every billionaire in Silicon Valley. They could target it and make it so that it's $1 million in net worth, $1 million in assets, anyone who is a billionaire. If they have one for every 11,600 residents, they could say, how much does it cost for us to house 11,600 residents? And then they could create a specific tax. If you're a billionaire and you live within the jurisdiction, we will tax you the amount that it takes to make 11,600 people have a home. And then, of course, the billionaires would leave. We know that. But the point is, why don't they enact these policies at the local level? If they feel like taxing the rich works, why don't they? I mean, I think I just stumbled upon that by accident, but hello? That's a good question. So they had a bill to expand affordable housing, but it failed to move forward because it lacked support from a quote unquote diverse coalition of business and advocacy groups. So there's a not in my backyard mentality taking root in big cities like San Francisco. You have billionaires who say, we don't want a homeless shelter in our neighborhood. We want you to deal with the homeless, but can you ship them over to Pleasanton or send them to the East Bay? And so Democrats who are elected there say that the issue goes beyond partisan politics, and there's a growing problem of cities thriving economically but becoming less livable for lower income residents at the same time. And this isn't about homeless shelters. Don't allow Democrats to make it seem like the homeless problems that are burgeoning in Democrat-run cities across the country have anything to do with shelters, because these people need permanent places to live. So building more shelters is a temporary solution that gets people off the street and gets them to using bathrooms and living like human beings for a time. But shelter living is degrading in and of itself. There's no privacy there. And it's horrible. It's a horrible situation for women and children. There's no safety there. So the issue is that they need to build affordable housing, meaning they need high-rise buildings, they need apartments, they need condos, they need 4 families, 6 families. They need townhomes. They need the full range of housing options that are present all over the country, except in areas where environmentalists have convinced them that there are too many people here already, and so we can't build any more homes. We need pristine, large swaths of land with nothing on them but tree frogs and grass and a couple of tumbleweeds. And when they buy into that, the existing housing stock continues to skyrocket in value because everybody's fighting over the same 10 houses. So this story is over at Fox News. It's a New York Times op-ed, calls out unlivable conditions in the Democratic-led cities. And I got to tell you, this is some kind of sad. The economy is booming in these parts of California. No one feels good about it. When the cost of living is taken into account, billionaire brimming California ranks as the most poverty-stricken state, with a fifth of the population struggling to get by. Since 2010, migration out of California has surged. 1 out of every 11,600 people there is a billionaire. I know, and being a billionaire is so odd. In Missouri, I think we only have 2 in the entire state, 5.7 million people. It's an oddity here. If you're a billionaire in Missouri, everybody here knows who you are. We don't know where you live, but we know who you are. Oh, my goodness, y'all. Let's keep praying about these issues. If we can't think of a solution, which, we're not that great at that, but God has a solution, and he will give it to us if we pray about it. All right. Enjoy your evening. Have a fantastic night. God bless from the Heartland. I'm Stacey Washington.